Hello and welcome again to another episode of Battle Ready.
Ready.
And today we thought we'd tackle other kinds of gaming.
Tackling you.
There you go. So we enjoy games.
We do.
Video games, board games, card games, all that sort of stuff. And I've seen a lot online recently about people who play Age of Sigmar or Warhammer in general.
Yeah.
Saying, once things become too board gamey, I lose interest, or I only like miniature games. And so I thought we'd talk a little bit about that because we both enjoy both.
We do.
Yeah,
we do
board
both
games
both.
and miniature games. So first, Drake, if you had to, let's just say you had to pick and you said, all right, from now on, forever, you can only play miniature games or board games. Which would you pick?
I can't pick. I couldn't make that decision.
No?
Unless we turn all board games into miniature games.
There you go. Now, I would ultimately pick miniature games. I think I just have more fun playing miniature games because, they come with little cool toys, and I love the stories that you get out of it.
It would depend on what board game I would have to play forever.
So, but let's talk about why somebody might want to play a board game. Now, most board games are not going to have cool miniatures, and as far as I know, almost none have the kind of cool miniatures you get out of like Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
So that is a demerit. But why would you want to play a board game, Drake? What are some goods for board games?
Board games usually won't have such big variables with dice that our miniature games do.
Well, maybe. So so board games basically break into two categories, and now there's a lot of overlap. They're not the line gets very fuzzy, right? And when you get close to it, but there's sort of the European style of board game, which is lower conflict, lower luck, right? And it's more like efficiency puzzles and hand management and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's ones that are more like you see it from American or British designs that are much more in conflict. So something like Axis and Allies, on that's lots of dice, lots of conflict. War of the Ring, which is interesting because I would put it in that category, but it's an Italian design.
War of the Ring split between miniature and board
game. It has little minis, but I wouldn't call it it's definitely a board game, right? Because you could play the whole game with little cubes, right? Like the miniatures are just cubes that look cool. So
cool looking cubes.
They're definitely more with the luck side. So I think that while Warhammer and miniature games generally do have a lot more luck and dice rolling, some board games do too. Mm-hmm. Why else might you? But there are games, like you said, like one that we like to play, Castles of Burgundy, right? Very fun. It very low luck. What happens is you roll the dice first, and then based on what they say, you choose what actions you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so you never are in a situation where you say, all right, I definitely try to hit that guy, and then you roll to see if you succeed or fail.
Yeah.
You roll first, that sets the parameters, and then you figure out your efficiencies from there.
Yeah.
Why else might somebody want to play a board game?
Board games in general might have a wider range of stories, or like a wider range of things. Like you could compare a game like Mansions of Madness to a game like War of the Ring. That's a huge difference.
Yes, so I think board games as a genre have more in them. Yes, I think that's true. One of the things I love about board games is how contained it is.
Yes.
Miniature games are great.
Yes.
Super good. But if I want to go to someone's house and play minis, it's a bit of an ordeal, especially if I want to take terrain or something. Yeah. Or let's say I want to show my friend some Age of Sigmar stuff.
Oh, pictures are better.
Yeah, pictures are good. But if you want to show them to play, right, it's a bit of an ordeal. You're lugging multiple boxes and multiple crates or whatever you have, right? Whereas the board game fits in a box. Yeah. And then even when you buy expansions, almost always
stuff fits in the box.
You can fit them in the box. So it's much more contained, easier to transport, and one of the things I like about board games is if I go to my parents' house, Drake's grandparents' house, and I want to bring some games, I can bring
like
4 or 5 games, easy, and plus some card games, easy, so that there's a variety of things to choose from. where it would take more crates and involve more packing and traveling nonsense for one game, for one kind of experience, right? So I do like that better. I also like that when we say it's contained, I also mean it's contained in the terms of price. Like once you buy the thing,
you've bought the thing.
You've bought the thing. You're good to go. And setup times are usually much less than miniature games. So you get into the game first or faster. They're usually much simpler to explain to new people.
Yes.
Not always true, but there's usually that. And especially like miniature games, once the first time you play a miniature game, there can be some confusing things about it, right?
We know from experience.
Yeah. But then once you've played a couple, we've played Age of Sigmar, Kill Team,
Warcry.
We've got several games under our belt. And so now when a new rule comes up, we say, oh, okay, so this is sort of like that Warcry rule. We have a frame of reference. And so once you've played a few board games, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So I think board games have a lot to recommend them. And I wouldn't, just because somebody says, oh, this is a board game, doesn't mean it's something that you should
downsay.
Yeah, say, oh, I don't play board games.
Yeah.
That's like saying I don't play video games. Well, you might not play, My Little Pony Princess Adventure, right? You don't play that video game, but there might be a video game. Maybe you love Tears of the Kingdom.
Yes!
Right? Or whatever else, right? So you try not to swear off the whole medium just because there might be a game or two that is not your taste. And that's true for everybody. There are generally bad board games. But then there are ones that are just, they're great, but not for me.
Yeah.
Right? Easy. Now, why would you, if board games are so great, why would you want to why give up the time? You could use that time to play board games. Why use that time playing miniatures instead?
Miniatures will usually have more of a feel for it. More like you're actually doing things.
Okay, explain that
in
a
the
little
sense if I'm playing a board game, I just play this card and then stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
But in a miniature game, I'm moving my soldier stuff. I'm making things happen. I'm not just passively doing things.
So I get what you're saying.
Yes.
I think what you're saying is that you identify with your pieces more in a miniature game.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Especially, I do a little bit when we play like War of the Ring. I do identify more with the Shadow or with the Free Peoples, depending on who I'm playing. But you're right. Like when we're playing Castles of Burgundy or Puerto Rico or Notre Dame, right? When we play Notre Dame, I'm not identifying with my trusted friend or my cubes, right? Like my carriage. It's just little pieces I'm moving around.
Yeah.
But in a miniatures game, you can get super animated when the Carnosaur killer has his day in the sun, right?
He's like,
or when somebody finally takes down Olinder, or when Croak is
almost this
close to dying, right? And you have these memories. Yeah, you do identify more with the pieces on the table.
Especially if you painted them yourself. You're like, no, my guy that I worked like 9 hours on.
Yeah, there's some of that too. And it's like, oh, the things that you're displaying aren't just, oh, here's some stuff I bought. It's here's something I bought, but also took the time to put together and took the time to shave the mold lines and took the time to paint it up and spent hours painting the whole army or the whole unit or whatever to a standard that I'm happy with. And now I see it on the table. So it represents not just a cool looking game piece, but also it's the culmination of a lot of effort and investment.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's
what I meant to say, just in more confusing words.
I got you. I understood what you were saying. I understood. So yeah, I definitely think that's something that miniature games have over board games. What else?
I think you can definitely get more of a sense of like a war effort in like our miniature games than a board game.
What do you mean by a war effort?
Like you're in the war, like you're actually like having an effect. Whereas in like War of the Ring, just move little guys around and rolling dice and see if you get a 6.
Well, I think that maybe that's true, but I think one of the things that miniature games have over almost all, maybe not all, but almost all board and card games is the narrative.
Oh, yes.
You get a story out of it, right? You're like, oh, remember that time my guys walked up the edge and then we were able to fire down on your cover. Oh, remember that time when you were going to kill me, but then my guy went inactive and so he was able to hide from your gunshots. Oh, remember that time when your Remember that time when my warband won, and then my one warband guy went crazy, and you got to control him, and he beat the tar out of the rest of my warband. Right? It's cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
There are a couple of games I feel like that do that. One that's near and dear to my heart is a card game called Sentinels of the Multiverse. It is a cooperative game where each player has their own deck of cards representing a superhero, and then you cooperatively take down a supervillain. That one almost always leads to fantastic narrative as well.
I'm in it.
Well, there's a character named after Drake in there.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is there is a lot of cool narrative experiences in board games as well. But the general rule is you're going to get way more of that with a miniatures game. And I think with war games and miniatures games in general, because they have an element of simulationism, right? Where the rules aren't just there to be smooth and make it real easy, which is something that often gets praised in a board game. But the rules are a lot of times there to represent things that would be happening, right?
Yes.
They take out some of the abstraction and put in a little bit of crunchier rules. That means you've got more to learn, right? And you have to remember those exceptions, and you have to remember that sometimes people are yelling, "Look out, sir," and then you get a -1, right? So you have to remember those rules, but it does provide an experience that feels more like how a battle would be.
Yeah.
Is it still abstracted? Yes, of course, right? You're not when in a real war, no one's taking turns moving, right? Right? Oh, it's their turn. We're not going to march forward. It's their turn to move. Right? That's not what happens. But so there are still obviously game elements, but it does have a little bit less abstraction, and the rules try to reflect more of an actual battle than just how a board game would. You'd see more abstraction in a board game, right? Very cool. So, any other thoughts on miniature games?
One thing miniature games have a big advantage on over board games, especially miniature war games. You have a lot more freedom of moving your pieces around.
That is one of the miniature things the miniature games have best. So, and I know that some people cite this as the reason they like miniature games over board games. I agree. I think it's a positive.
Yes.
Okay. So I love that, and when we play Age of Sigmar, if I want to move my guy this straight, I can. But if I want to move him at a little bit angle, I can. If I want to move him around a corner, I can.
Yeah.
If I want to move him just enough so that his pinky toe's on the objective, and then the rest of him's off, I can do that, right? And then with a lot of games that are very good skirmishy games like Earth Reborn.
Yes.
Great skirmish game, but it's a grid-based game.
Yes.
So you have to move on the squares, right? And it's fun. I enjoy that game. I like it a lot. But there's something freeing about being able to just move your guys anywhere you want. Because when you're moving on the squares, you're thinking, all right, how can I make best use of these game mechanisms? And when you can move anywhere, you're thinking,
how can I move around this terrain?
Well, I feel like, how can I get cover?
Yeah.
Which is more battlefield oriented, right? Oh, how can I get out of sight? Oh, how can I get insight so I can cast a spell? Oh, how can I, get some distance between me and that big thing that's going to come and crush me, right? You have those sorts of thoughts, which are more sort of at the battlefield level than, how many squares can I move such that I can then shoot? Well, my guy can only shoot 16 squares. So, and it's just, it makes it feel a little more gamey. And so if you really like that simulationist narrative, it removes it a little bit. It's not, at least for me, it's not a deal breaker at all. I like Earth Reborn. I like games like that. But if you could do it without the grid, it's a little bit better. It's a little bit better. Although I think it does scare some people, right?
Like,
as soon as you say, all right, let's play this game. They say, all right, how many spaces can I move? On a grid, you can say 5 spaces or whatever. But when you play this game, you say, well, get out your tape measure. Right?
And move 6 inches.
And you can go that many inches. I think, it's a little bit farther away from Monopoly than most people are comfortable with at first. And so I do think that can be a little bit of a hurdle at first.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
I think we covered everything.
Yeah, I love miniature games. I think I do slightly prefer them to board games, although I love board. I'll put a picture up of our shelf, which has a few board games on it. And I mean, I love board games, and I think there is so much to recommend them, and they're less expensive. If you get good games, they're not cheap, but they're less expensive than miniatures.
Oh, yes.
Certainly, they're much less expensive than getting an army, a 2,000-point army.
Oh, yeah.
They're more transportable. They provide great experiences. It's often easier to get people to play them.
Yeah.
But so I think for anybody who says, I don't play board games. I only do miniature games. I am above board games are for those, board game people. No, definitely branch out a little bit. Start with the war games, right? There you go. Start with something like War of the Ring or Star Wars Rebellion or Root or Scythe or any of those kind of area control games.
The last two just went right over my head.
Yeah, I don't think you've played either of those.
Nope.
And then, if you like those, maybe you like something that has that's a little bit different. Maybe you like games with big narratives like Mansions of Madness or Sentinels.
Or Gloomhaven.
Or Gloomhaven.
It's a huge narrative.
Gloomhaven's great too.
We still need.
Or maybe you find out, oh, hey, I like some of these efficiency games too. And they can be great when you get together and you've played your battle and somebody has to go home or whatever, so you only have 90 minutes left anyway, maybe not enough for a full 2,000-point game. So you say, hey, let's break out Trajan. Let's break out Castles. Let's break out Notre Dame. Whatever, you're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts?
I think we've covered it all this time.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of Battle Ready.
Ready!